My mom kicked me out of my room to make space for her friend and her kids, so I moved out to live on my own and pay my own bills. Now, she's pleading with me to come back. Living at home at 23 wasn't exactly part of my plan for adulthood, but it turned out better than I expected. I wasn't just sitting around playing video games and snacking all day. I contributed by paying rent, covering my mom's phone bill, and even taking care of the power bill. In return, I got home-cooked meals, a comfortable place to live, and the freedom to focus on my freelance work without drowning in overwhelming expenses. My room wasn't just a place to sleep, it was my haven and my office. I had transformed it into a small studio for my content creation projects, hoping one day it would lead to big opportunities. Overall, the setup worked perfectly. That is, until Kelly, my mom's best friend, moved in with her 2 kids. Kelly was going through a tough divorce, and according to my mom, her husband had been terrible to her. I wasn't thrilled about the situation, but I understood why they needed a place to stay. The guest room, while small, seemed adequate for them. Initially, their presence was just a minor annoyance. The kids were noisy, but I could close my door, put on my headphones, and move on with my day. I assumed they'd only be staying for a short time, a few weeks at most, while Kelly got back on her feet. Unfortunately, things escalated faster than I could have imagined. One day, I came home from running errands and immediately sensed something was wrong. My door was open, and I could hear children laughing from the hallway. My stomach sank. When I walked in, I found my room in complete disarray. My studio equipment, expensive items like my microphone, lights, and camera, had been shoved into a corner as if they were junk. Kelly's kids were running wild in the room. Toys littered my bed, my desk chair had been moved, and worst of all, one of the kids was using my computer. "What's going on here?" I yelled, louder than I meant to. Before I could process the chaos, my mom's voice cut through my confusion. "Calm down. It's not a big deal," she said nonchalantly. "The kids needed more room, and your room is the biggest. It's only fair." "Fair?" I shot back. My room, the one I pay for, was now being treated like a public playroom. When I demanded that Kelly's kids leave immediately, my mom dismissed me as though I were the one being unreasonable. "You're being selfish," she said. "They need space to be comfortable." This wasn't about comfort. It was about respect. My room wasn't just a bedroom, it was the foundation of my work. I had poured over $3,000 into my setup, and I couldn't afford to replace anything if it got damaged. More importantly, I needed my space to maintain my career. Yet, when I tried to explain this, Kelly decided to weigh in with her condescending tone. "Oh, lighten up," she said. "They're just curious kids. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, they'd listen to you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Uptight? I was simply trying to protect the equipment I had worked hard to buy. The more I insisted on boundaries, the more I was painted as the villain. Kelly labeled me selfish, and my mom sided with her. Suddenly, in the house I'd been helping to support, I was the outsider. The next day, I tried reasoning with my mom, hoping she'd understand how important my studio setup was to my freelance career. "Mom, this isn't just some hobby. It's my job. If something gets damaged, I'll be in serious trouble," I explained. But she wasn't willing to listen. "This is my house, and I make the decisions," she said flatly. I was stunned. "Your house? I pay rent. I'm contributing, not freeloading here." Her response only made my frustration grow. "The kids need the space, and your room is the best option. Your brother's room is too small, and your sister's is full of her stuff." The excuses felt endless. Both of my siblings' rooms could have worked perfectly well, but my mom refused to consider them. Instead, she defended her decision by saying the kids loved my gadgets. "This isn't about them having fun." I snapped. This is my workspace. What happens if something gets broken? Stop being so paranoid, Kelly chimed in, rolling her eyes. They're just kids. You're acting like they're little monsters. I had reached my limit. I told my mom I'd move my studio setup to another room in the house, but she shut that idea down too. There's no space anywhere else, she said, brushing off my suggestion like it was ridiculous. Then what am I supposed to do? Just let them ruin my stuff? I asked, my voice rising with frustration. Life isn't fair, she said coldly. You're an adult. You should be able to handle a little inconvenience. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was complete disrespect for my work and my boundaries. I was paying rent for that room, yet I was being told I couldn't even use it. My mom officially made it off-limits to me, declaring it their space now. Over the next few days, I tried working from coffee shops, but it wasn't the same. I couldn't focus, and I quickly fell behind on deadlines. The stress was becoming unbearable. In a last-ditch effort, I proposed a compromise. Why don't I move my setup into the guest room, and they can take over my room? That way, I can still work, and they'll have the space they need. But my mom shot it down immediately. The guest room's too small for all your stuff. Kelly and the kids will stay in your room for as long as they need to. How long is that going to be? I asked, exasperated. For as long as it takes, she replied with a shrug. You don't get to set deadlines for other people's struggles. That night, I overheard Kelly venting to my mom in the kitchen. He's so immature and selfish. He doesn't get how hard this is for us, she complained. Her words stung, but they only confirmed what I already knew. I didn't belong in that house anymore. I had given so much, and in return, I was treated like I didn't matter. This isn't my problem anymore, I told my mom the next day, my voice steady and firm. You've made it clear that my contributions don't mean anything to you. If my money is all you care about, then you can figure out how to manage without it. She scoffed, her face twisting in disbelief. You're running away just because things got a little inconvenient. You're being selfish. I didn't waver. This isn't about inconvenience, Mom. It's about being treated with respect. You can't expect me to keep paying rent and helping out in a house where my needs and boundaries don't matter. At that moment, Kelly walked into the room, arms crossed and smirking. Honestly, you're making a big deal out of nothing. This is family. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices. I turned to her, my patience gone. Sacrifice? You mean giving up my room, my work, and my peace of mind so your kids can have fun? This isn't about family, it's about boundaries. And mine have been ignored for far too long. Kelly rolled her eyes, but I didn't care anymore. My decision was final, and I wasn't going to let guilt or manipulation change my mind. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to leave before things escalated further. My friends showed up with their cars, and together we loaded my belongings as quickly as possible. One of them recorded the entire process, just in case there were any arguments or accusations later. As I packed the last of my things, my mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression a mix of irritation and disbelief. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice quieter than usual but still lacking any genuine regret. I do, I replied, meeting her eyes. I've tried to make this work, but you've shown me exactly where I stand in this house. I hope things improve for you, but I need to put myself first now. With that, I walked out, leaving behind the home I had known for years. As I drove to my new place, emotions churned within me, sadness, anger, and, most of all, relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. Later that evening, my sister called. Her tone was predictably sharp. Do you even care about what's happening to Mom? She's struggling to keep up with the bills. You've left her in a terrible spot. I took a deep breath before responding. I've always cared. That's why I paid rent, even when I didn't have to. But caring doesn't mean letting people take advantage of me. Mom made her decisions, and now she has to deal with the consequences. There was a long silence on her end. I could tell she was trying to come up with something to counter me, but she knew I was right. I get that you're upset, she finally said, her voice softer. But don't you think you're overreacting? You could have just sat down and worked things out with her. I let out a bitter laugh. Do you have any idea how many times I tried that? I told her what I needed, how I felt, what was fair. Every single time, I was ignored. She made it clear, this is her house, her rules. Fine. Now it's her bills, her responsibility. That's how it works. Her silence spoke volumes. She knew I wasn't wrong, but it didn't make the truth any easier to accept. I didn't want this, I continued, my tone calmer now. But I had to leave to protect myself. And honestly, I feel better now than I have in months. I'm finally able to breathe. She sighed heavily. Fine. Just don't shut her out completely, okay? She's still Mom. I'll think about it, I replied, though I had no intention of reopening that door anytime soon. When we hung up, a familiar pang of guilt surfaced, but I pushed it aside. I looked around at my new place, a modest room in an older building, far from perfect but undeniably mine. The quiet, the freedom, the ability to focus, it was worth everything I had gone through to get here. In the weeks that followed, my mom's messages became less frequent, though they were no less angry. She accused me of abandoning her, of being selfish and ungrateful. I read them without replying. Nothing I said would change her mind, and I refused to let her drag me back into the chaos. My focus was on rebuilding, setting up my studio, getting back to work, and rediscovering the parts of myself that had been buried under stress for far too long. Then, one morning, I woke up to a text from a distant relative, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, I heard about the situation with your mom. Are you okay? Confused, I asked what they were talking about. A moment later, they sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my mom had written. In the post, she painted herself as the victim, claiming I had abandoned her and the family during their time of need. She conveniently left out the part where she gave away my room or treated me like an afterthought. To anyone reading it, I looked like an ungrateful, selfish child who had walked away for no reason. I was furious. Handling this in private was one thing, but airing it all out on social media and twisting the truth? That crossed the line. For a moment, I considered posting a response to defend myself, but I stopped. Anyone who believed her story wasn't worth my energy. The people who mattered, the ones who truly cared, already knew the truth. Letting it go wasn't easy, but it was the better choice. Now, a month later, I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. My new home isn't luxurious, it's small and a bit quirky, but it's mine. The peace and quiet here are worth more than any fancy room I could have had. My work is back on track, my stress is lower, and for the first time in years, I feel free. My mom still texts me occasionally, but I've set clear boundaries. I keep our conversations short and neutral, avoiding anything that could pull me back into her manipulation. I refuse to let guilt control me anymore. Do I feel bad about leaving? Sometimes, yes. It's hard not to feel that way when I think about how things ended. But deep down, I know I made the right decision. Respect wasn't something I was going to get from her in that house. I had to leave to find it elsewhere. Moving out was the best thing I've ever done for myself, and I don't regret it, not even for a second. Thank you for watching the video, subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.